All right, welcome back to another episode of the Demand Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan, the co-founder of Omni Lab, and today I'm joined by Breezy Beaumont, who's the head of growth at Correlated. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, cool. So typically where we always start is I always want to just give a little bit of background. So for anyone's listening that doesn't know what you guys do, just to better understand that so that anything we talk about down below, they understand kind of how to relate that to them. So tell us just a little bit about kind of 411 on Correlated.
Yeah, for sure. So Correlated is a product-led growth company ourselves, and we also primarily work with product-led growth companies. And so what we're doing there is we're trying to help better enable their revenue teams. So sales, marketing, customer success with product usage data. So help them understand what are their customers doing in their product, notify them in those key moments when people take different types of actions like inviting new users, et cetera. And then also kicking off some downstream events. So, maybe adding someone to an outreach or sales loft sequence, stuff like that.
Right. So essentially, I sign up for a product. Let's say I sign up for Correlated, for example, and I'm sure maybe you guys even use your own software, right, to do this, but which would make sense, right? And then so I sign up for it, and then I guess I take a couple of actions in the product, and then that may kick off a sequence where it says, hey, this person's actually ready to potentially talk to sales, and sales would take that. So that might be something Correlated could help, is uncover those engagement points where these people are actually ready to talk to sales, or maybe not free sign up, but also upsell. I think you mentioned too. So that's kind of accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So at these different points in the customer journey, when it's time to have a conversation, positive or negative, usually it's a positive conversation, like time for a revenue conversation, but you also can look at some churn prevention there. So it's kind of like the idea of like product qualified leads. So across that whole customer journey, but it's not just one thing that I think is important is that knowing when that moment is important and it's crucial, but knowing what to do in that moment is maybe more crucial. So it's not just about being alerted about something, but it's really the ability to take action on that insight. So that's our focus.
Oh, 100%. And then I feel like the market, like who you guys market to could be wide. Like it seems like there's a lot of different use cases around this. Like sales could maybe be involved, customer success, the product team. Is that right? Is like there a pretty broad spectrum of like the folks that ultimately you guys are marketing to?
Yeah, so we're generally working with the revenue team. So that will be that is still a broad term, but sales, customer success, marketing, and then sometimes like tangentially to marketing, it's like growth teams or SDR management teams. So so anywhere where there's sort of a revenue conversation to be had.
Got it. I want to break that down too a little bit once we get down further into this, because I want to figure out, how are you guys actually breaking some of those things down? Because clearly like some of those probably deserve different messages or even different types of content, but I'm not sure, maybe you guys haven't gotten that far, but we'll come back to that here in a second. But one thing that I know you've talked about, I think there's even a blog that maybe you wrote or someone else wrote on your website that I read one time, the differences between like PQL and MQL. And there's still a lot of people that obviously are measuring MQLs, a lot of people that are not anymore as well, moving more to demand gen motions, which is actually what I was talking about earlier with the Cognizant folks about, their journey from lead gen to demand gen, and now not, no longer really looking at the MQL type of metric. But tell us, I guess, like, how do you guys view MQLs for you at Correlated? Like, when does someone become an MQL? And then maybe more broadly speaking too, for other people that either have a product-led motion company, product-led growth company, and are thinking about, how to define this.
Yeah. I mean, so quick definition there, like the difference between an MQL and a PQL is they feel super different. They have used different terms in them, but in reality, the differences are not that crazy. So in an MQL, right, we have information about what company is somebody coming from. So what's their company size, industry, this or that. Maybe we're looking at their title, their seniority level, et cetera. And then we're adding in information about what they've done to interact with us on the marketing side. So that's website visits, that's downloading certain content, attending certain events. So similarly, a product qualified lead has all the beginning of what we talked about. So things about the company, about the person themselves. But then instead of that marketing data, we're looking at product usage data. So what actions have they done in the product? How many times have they logged in? Did they try a key feature? Things like that. So in the same sort of layering, it's similar there, but slightly different. And one thing I will say on that topic as well is that We are seeing some companies who are layering in what would traditionally be some of those touch points in an MQL as a
Right.
part of
Oh,
their
that's interesting.
PQL as well. So there's sort of a crossover there between the two of them.
Do you think that's difficult though? I mean, I think in the beginning, especially like if you're a newer company and you're just getting into this and you're trying to get some of your, maybe you've got 10, 15 signups, maybe you've got more, right? But it's a smaller number of people that are actually trying out your product. Difficult to understand really what those engagement points should be. So does the definition change over time, you think? I mean, especially as you're trying to figure out, for example, I think Monday.com uses something like if you create a board or a project and then add a certain amount of tasks to it, then that will kick off to the sales team. And then I think Slack was something like 1,000 messages or 100 messages need to be sent, and that shows engagement in the product. But I would imagine though that these things change over time. So you might have a definition in the beginning, which is maybe a little bit looser, right? Because you don't know exactly what those engagements are that lead to upgrades or reasons why someone would want to talk to sales. And then further down the line, is that kind of accurate for you guys, or where are you guys in that whole motion?
Yeah, and what you're actually touching on is one of the additional differences between an MQL and a PQL. So for an
Good. Love it.
MQL, you only really become an MQL one time, or you only have one
Uh-huh.
definition for an MQL.
Ah,
Later
good.
stage
Mm-hmm.
companies will sometimes bring in a re-MQL, recycled MQL, something like that. But that's like almost like a
Sure.
beta for them, and I haven't seen it really well ironed out even in that use case. But for PQLs, uh, there's an S at the end of PQLs because you're doing multiple of them. So what you're
Hmm.
really hitting on, and I think this is everyone's kind of common thinking because we've been in this MQL era for so long, is that
Mm-hmm.
initial PQL. And that one is really crucial. So what is our PQL number one? And that's when you have people sort of in this free or one of your lower tiers and you're trying to move them either to paid
Hmm.
or up to more of like a business tier or team tier. And so
Hmm.
that's sort of your first definition for a PQL. But then you actually want to, like we were talking about, every time there's an opportunity for more of a revenue conversation, that's an
Hmm.
additional PQL opportunity. And
Hmm. Is that
so
like a different name, you mean? Like it's like you've got your initial PQL, so it turns PQL based off of firmographic. Is it ICP fit? Do they have
mhm.
the right engagement points? But then you're saying then there's like even stages you guys have below that where you call it something completely different? Or
So
is
I'd
it
say it's
just like,
stages past that. So at every stage
yeah,
where there's a revenue conversation, you can have different definitions. So
got it.
instead of one MQL, one P, like you have one MQL, you don't just have one PQL, you might have 10 PQL definitions or more
Right.
than 10 PQL definitions. You could also layer them out based on, that's why I think people put in MQL scoring, right? So you'd say, okay, 90 plus on the MQL score, then this team follows up with it,
Right.
70 to 90, this team follows up with it. So
Hmm.
similar but different is that
Interesting.
you have sort of different PQL definitions. So maybe let's say for your top tier companies,
Mm-hmm.
for you, maybe that's just based on company size. So you'd say, okay, any company over X amount of employees or X amount of
Mm-hmm.
revenue, we want to have directly to sales. So you would set up that PQL definition for someone on the sales team. Then you might have a different one
Hmm.
for sort of your just larger batch of users,
Hmm.
but there still might be users in there who are really becoming core users even though their maybe
Hmm.
title or company demographic didn't fit what you were originally thinking of for your ICP, and that's a good
Interesting.
conversation to be had there. Then throughout that any user's customer journey, there's additional places to have more of a revenue conversation. And one of the big reasons why this happens and why there's so many definitions needed, so people call them PQLs or they might call them signals or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. And one of the big reasons for this is because there's a lot more expansion in product-led growth companies than what we see in
Mm.
traditional, sales-led or marketing-led companies. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, we would always talk about land and expand, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, land and expand." But I would like you to name quickly 5 companies who are truly doing a good expand motion. Most are really not. They're
Mm.
landing, but they're not expanding, and that's
Mm.
definitely not the case in product-led growth because you land at pretty much zero. Whereas in a marketing-led
Right.
or sales-led company, you land with a 3-year contract that's X amount
Right.
of money and blah, blah, blah. So the expansion opportunities. So not only are there multiple pricing tiers in product-led companies, but often multiple product lines or multiple solutions that they might offer and sort of layer in. So there's a lot of cross-sell and upsell opportunity that you wouldn't see in a more traditional company. And therefore, that's why we need to have, notifications, signals, PQLs along that entire customer journey, so that we know when to reach out and we have the
Mm-hmm.
context for how to reach out. So, Jonathan just invited 3 more users. He's tried a feature that's actually gated and it's not part of his current plan. Now we can reach out and say, like, hey, Jonathan, I saw you tried to use this feature. Love to jump on a call, talk
Mm-hmm.
about what benefits you might be able to get out of it. Or if you'd rather not have a call, here's a doc that you can kind of read through. Let me know how I can help you. And so
Right.
it's a little bit of a different type of conversation as well that happens in these different opportunities.
I think that's interesting because I think what we're always arguing about with anything in marketing is when you should actually reach out and have sales contact that lead, right? Is it off a contact download? And let's think stepping away from product led for 1 second, just as an example. It's a webinar lead. Is that a lead? Should we send that over to sales? Should sales be following up on it? Here's a content download. They just downloaded an ebook. Should it go over to sales? And then I think the same thing is really true that we're talking about here to an extent, right? Because we're deciding based upon certain, historical data and engagement points within it across hopefully, large enough sample size to say, okay, cool. Yeah, they're now a PQL because of these things that we've seen. So now we're going to reach out. And I would imagine, again, I think going back to your point, I think there's got to be multiple definitions or even a involvement of definition too, because you might be wrong that the first initial engagement points that you got out, and when you decide to send those over to sales, sales is saying, hey, no, these guys aren't ready. And they're giving you that feedback, I bet. Is there that conversation that you guys have back with sales all the time? We're like, hey, Breezy, yeah, thanks. Your definition's a little loose. We're getting a lot of weird leads here. These guys are not ready. Is that a conversation happen, or have you guys kind of got
Yeah,
it
no,
pretty
it is an
succinct?
ever evolving thing for every single company. I have talked to MongoDB and
Exactly.
Slack and Atlassian, and I talked to the folks at
Yeah,
Calendly and all these different
totally.
people, and it is always evolving. I like to think of it as like the Goldilocks PQLs. So for every single PQL that you create, it's like this one was right,
Yep.
except for now it's too hot or now it's too cold. So
Right.
i.e. there's too much of this or too few in here that are making sense, or they're not converting like we imagine that they would. And
Right.
so actually that's something that we felt ourselves at Correlated, and with our customers as well, who are like, okay, now we've been able to better understand, okay, here are different PQL opportunities. We're
Yeah.
notifying the team, we're kicking off emails and sequences to these folks, and we're having a
Hmm.
conversation. But now it's like, well, is it working? How's it going? And so
Exactly.
on the product side, actually, we put in goals as well, so you can track, okay, here's what I'm trying to get at, what's the outcome that I
Hmm.
want there. And then, Correlated, like, product aside, that's what we're also looking at on our side, right? So there's totally a back and forth. Actually, the alignment piece, we've talked about alignment, and it's maybe like for some people, like, tune out the minute somebody talks about sales and marketing alignment. But in product led,
It's a common topic. Yep.
yeah, exactly. In product led, there is a very much a forced alignment. So whether or not you want to be aligned,
Uh-huh.
you have to be, and you will be, because you're working off of the
Hmm.
same data set. You're working the same folks. Marketers are working with customers throughout their entire life cycle. So it's not just early phase and then throw them over. You're really responsible for the success of that customer. Same with sales.
Hmm.
Sales is not only just getting them to sign a contract and then saying, like, oh, CS, good luck over there. Now they're
Exactly.
responsible for expansion opportunities across that entire customer journey, customer success. So everyone's it's really like an all hands on deck, and hopefully you like working collaboratively, because that's what it feels like internally.
Well, I think it ends up creating a better relationship, right? Because traditionally, you're right. In a lot of sales led motions, you close the first deal, right? Done. See you later, client. Good luck. Have fun at CS. And to your point, now it's saying, hey, wait a minute, no, you can continue that relationship, continue deepening that relationship with that customer. And as you get data points and use tools like Correlated and others to bring up data points that say, hey, this person's actually interested in this feature, or they've taken these actions on this product, or so on and so forth, you should reach out again. Those are hugely helpful, because I imagine when you've got a list of, say you're managing as a sales rep, maybe 25, 50 accounts, it's like, how do you prioritize which ones you actually go after? Like
Yeah.
that's got to be tough, especially once the deal's closed. Like you don't really know. You can do your kind of typical follow up and say, hey, how are things going? Like just wanted to check in, tell you about some new stuff, but you're not, a lot of times like it's not easy for sales reps to get their hands on that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing on the sales rep side specifically is a change in the compensation structure for sales reps,
Mm,
that is driving them to become more engaged with customers throughout that life cycle. So for the variable
yeah.
comp for a sales rep, it used to be primarily as much as even 100% of their variable comp would be based on the land of a customer. So getting them to sign that
Right.
first initial contract. And now we're seeing a big shift in the maybe 75% of their variable compensation will be on the expansion of a deal and 25% on the
Yep.
land, which if you would look at what type of behavior would that drive, that would mean that people are going to land a customer at a low amount and make sure that they're successful to expand quickly because they're making a lot more money when they expand. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like a win-win for the business because obviously it drives great financial metrics if you're operating in that way,
Yeah.
like things like NRR. But yeah, it's definitely a shift. And I've talked to a lot of sales folks who are, some are excited about it, some are a little bit more cautious of walking into it. But yeah, it's one of the markets.
Yeah, I think I saw you talking with Mark over like ex HubSpot, about that, and of course he did that back in HubSpot days where he said, you know what, we're going to take away all your comp that you get on the first side of the deal and put it more on the latter, the latter deals, right? So I just want you to like get the deal done, because then that what that did is then incentivize the sales rep just to get the deal done, not try to oversell it, right?
Yeah,
Where you're saying no, 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 like let's try to get it in every single department right now. No, 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 no. Let's just get it in one. Let's get the deal done. Let's get them using it. Let's get them in the product, and then we can work on the expansion later. And a lot of them, I think he said on your webinar, and I know I've heard him say this on other things too, is that like, they were like, oh my God, what? Like, this is crazy. You're going to allow us to do this? Like, I'm just going to totally like just close little small deals then to get the first deal. And then I'm going to, wait to get the second. He's like, that's right. That's exactly what I want you to do.
perfect. Thank you
So
very much. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Perfect. This is how my plan works. So this is great. And then I guess just kind of moving on from this too, and this kind of like, I guess, segues in a little bit, but there's obviously a lot of SaaS companies, at least that we talk to, that are thinking about being product led. And I think you might have some thoughts on this, but it's not as easy as just saying, let's put a button that says start free trial on our website. There's a lot more to it. And I think a lot of CEOs are thinking like, hey, this whole thing sounds kind of cool, PLG. I've heard Breezy talk about it on LinkedIn, and like we should do this. It's a great way to drive more signups, get people into the product and all that, right? But like, what are some of the challenges that you see with that? Because clearly there are other things to consider when making that move. And I guess, have you seen others make that move successfully, or do you think that you really need to kind of start PLG first and then move into more of a sales led motion, right? Where you've got, people coming in, trying out the product, and you've got, of course, salespeople following up based on the engagement. Like, what's your thought on all that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the drive to want to be product led is, I think we think of it maybe as like, oh, it's shiny object syndrome. Oh, people just want to do this. But I think the
Yep.
main driver for a lot of folks is pressure from their prospects and from their customers who are maybe in
Mm,
the sales process to, hey, I want to try it out. Can't I just use the product? And so I
mm,
think that's where a lot of people are getting the pressure from. And needless to say, also maybe from their investors a little bit, who would like to
yeah.
see some of the financial metrics that come with a product led go to market motion. That said,
Mm,
you're totally right. I mean, there are a lot of bumps that will be in the road. Just like anytime you change some major process internally, the same will happen with product led. It is not just an additional demand gen funnel or whatever for a company.
hmm
It really changes the way that your entire team operates. And I mean, truly your entire team, because when you
mm,
put that button on the website, I mean, I think that put a button on the website is a great way to test out, okay, what would it look like if people start to do this? And I think that's one way
sure.
that you can put it on the website for a period of time to see, okay, what would it look like if people start to use this? those people are basically your beta testers. And then maybe you
Hmm.
turn it off while you clean up a couple things and get your stuff in order. But
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, a couple of the things that you'll run into. So people will start to sign up to use the product, which is great. Now they, maybe you're manually whitelisting them and creating that account for them in the early days. So that means someone on your team is responsible for doing that. Now someone lands in the
Hmm.
product, and that's when you'll really start to learn a lot of things. And that's where the sales rep needs to figure out, okay, how are they going to sell to someone who's currently now in the product? They need to have a much deeper product knowledge, most likely. The marketing team
Exactly.
needs to figure out, how do we interact with people, not just pre-trial, but during their trial, or whatever you set up for your product-led motion, and throughout
Mm.
their life cycle. How can we do things like build virality into our product so that when people use it, they can share it with others, and there's some sort of network effects built into it.
Right.
Your engineering team will need to pick things up, and your product team will need to change some things around. You might realize that, yeah, your
Hmm.
onboarding was super manual, and the only way to do it was with really handheld onboarding. So maybe you need to
Right.
enable some better self-service capabilities inside of your product. So it will definitely be a full team effort to pull it off. That said, I mean, I'm a huge fan of product-led growth anyways.
Hmm.
But I do also think that it's going to be crucial for companies going forward. I think
Yeah.
that if you don't go product led, your competition probably will, or someone will come in the market that is product led and become competitive with you. And I think it's a good way to build a moat around yourself. And you
Hmm.
need to be evolving and moving as a company. I think that the software space is moving faster than we've seen it before, and it will continue to move faster and faster. If you look back 5 years
Yeah.
and the changes that have happened in 5 years versus the changes that happened for the previous 10 years before that, things are rapidly evolving. And it can be
Hmm.
hard for people who have built a career in a certain format to sort of change their thinking. But I
Yeah.
think it's crucial, and I think a lot of the big players that we think of as really highly successful companies with great brands today will, be in some hot water within a couple of years with product-led companies coming up on their heels.
Hmm. No, no doubt. And I think at the end of the day, like people are always going to take the least path of resistance, right? I mean, people have always hated friction. So if I've got two companies standing next to each other, and one is I click get a demo, I wait 2 days to get on someone's calendar, I still don't get the demo, then I wait another 3 days to talk to the AE, then I finally get the demo, and finally understand like if this product's even going to work for me in my situation, like that model, like no one want, and people don't like going through that and waiting so long. They just want to get into it. And if you've got that other company on the other side that's saying, hey, listen, like here you go, just try it out, take a tour, we gave you a little story, you can look at it, you can feel around. There's also a cool company we work with called Toriel that makes these little like cool like tour stories on the website. So even if you're not, this is great for like sales led motion companies because it just opens up the product a little bit more. So it's kind of like a inner term type of motion where it's like, hey, I know that we don't want to send everyone down the demo. We still want to educate people on what the product does. So, hey, here's a tour, like go take it yourself, which is the same experience you'd have, generally speaking, in a product led motion where you'd have something like a Pindo or whatever tool you use to kind of walk them through, like, hey, here's how you do this, here's how you go over here, and you give them a little tour. So people are always going to look for that least path of resistance. I think that's the reason that, to your point, buyers are demanding that I don't want to go through your system anymore. I don't want to go through your waterfall nurture program. I just want to try it out. I want to see it. I want to know how it works and quickly.
Yeah. I mean, product led is thought of as a way of offering your product and this and that. What product led is really doing is it's a way of improving the buying process. And so,
Yeah.
how can we reduce as much friction as possible? So even if in your example, let's say we have, Chili Piper or Calendly and people can directly book on our calendar, they still don't necessarily want to do that. Some people do and some
Mm.
people don't. And so that's why I think we want to
Yeah.
offer sort of either way. Let people choose. Do they want to choose to have a demo with you? Do they want to choose to get into your product and get their hands dirty?
Yeah.
Do they want to have a demo with you and then start using your product? Do they want to start using
Yeah.
your product, understand it conceptually, and then jump on a couple demo calls with you. And maybe they don't even want to
Yep.
onboard themselves. They just want to like understand the product a little bit before they hear the value from someone on your team. So it's very
Yeah.
much a back and forth. It's just about letting the customer choose where they want to go and reducing as much of the weird barriers that we have consistently put into
Yeah.
place for people, like gated content and all this stuff. It's just, it's
Hmm.
just so unnecessary. Give the people what they
Hmm.
want and let them educate
Exactly.
themselves. Let them get in your product if they'd like to. And if they're not successful when they land in your product, then that's on you as a company to solve. You either need to solve it in
Yeah.
the product or you need to insert people into that process to be able to solve it.
No doubt. Well, you just segued very well because you're probably reading my outline into what I wanted to talk about next, which was clearly you guys have on your website a book a demo CTA, but you also have I think it's a free trial or something like that. I forget exactly what the CTA says, but you've got both motions there. Do you feel or should you be worried about at all? It sounds like you're not clearly, but I'd like to kind of just understand it because I think, some clients we'll talk with are worried about one cannibalizing the other, especially those that are moving more towards a product led motion where generally they've relied on book a demo and getting those leads coming in and feeling like, well, hey, and especially the sales team has said this to me when we talk to sales teams and sales leaders. Well, shit, if we put on a sign up for free, well, no one's going to want a demo. Like they're not going to come in to see a demo. And do you think that there's some cannibalization there in terms of having both different actions or any confusion on that? Or do you think this is just really just kind of like serving multiple customers for multiple needs? At the end of the day, like you said, some people want a demo, some people want a trial. Like what's the story there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think two things. I think that, yes, there is some cannibalization. We'll get into it. But I think it
Mm-hmm.
also increases overall pipeline. So let's say you have, 10 people who were going to request a demo before, and that was the path they were going to take. Now, if
Right.
you're offering for people to get started in the product or request a demo, I'd say your total might be something like 12 people are now willing to convert,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe 8 of them will choose a demo, but 4 might choose to get into your product. So overall pipeline
Right.
will be higher, but I don't want to be unrealistic. I think, yeah, definitely. I think by giving people
Mm-hmm.
the choice between, having a demo and product, some people are going to choose if they want to use the product. But the thing about this is, and this is where companies I think are getting it wrong, and this is why there's some initial pushback from the sales team, is that that doesn't mean that sales shouldn't be involved. In fact, sales should be
Mm-hmm.
involved with the people who are going that product route just as much as they should be involved with the demo folks. So I think, you should first give people some space to be
Mm-hmm.
able to play around in the product and see if they can,
Yep.
decide what they'd like to work on. And that's where that one of those PQLs we talked about comes into play. So once they've taken X amount of actions in your product, or they've integrated 1 or 2 core integrations or whatever it may be for your product, we can talk about some examples if you'd like, but it's always like a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
per company.
Yeah.
And then, so you let them do that. And then just like how we have the MQL, like, oh, you can't touch leads, but you can touch MQLs. We have a little bit of a gap
Right.
in time to let people play around. And then you can kind
Mm-hmm.
of pass that over to the sales team to have a conversation. So for sales, what
Mm-hmm.
that means is that they need to have access to product usage data, because otherwise what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, they're going to get on the call with that person who's been using the product. First of all, that salesperson better understand how the product works and everything of the ins and outs of it, which
Yep. You'd hope so.
is not necessarily something that everybody has, even though they've been
Yep.
selling it for a while. And so, but
Mm-hmm.
then if they get on that call and they're just like, hey, so, and try to go down their normal like discovery and demo path, it's not going to work. Instead, they need to be able to have a
Yeah.
good conversation to say, hey, Jonathan, I saw that you were trying this and that in the product. Curious, sort of what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? How can I help you? It's more of a strategic, consultative
Yeah.
conversation. But sales should definitely be involved in that. So to answer your question, yes, it will cannibalize some of your demos. Overall, though, it will increase your pipeline more than before. And your sales team should still be involved in both of that. And if you're accurately and appropriately explaining this to your team, your sales team should actually be pretty excited about this move.
Yeah, no doubt. For you guys, do you find that more people prefer to come in and actually trial the product and just get into it, or more people come in and demo?
We see both. I'd say more people choose to use the product first than to demo
Yeah,
for
which
us.
would make
But I
sense
think
because
that's
there's a
also
lot,
a
lot less friction.
reflection. Yeah, and I think that's also a reflection of our market, right? So we're working with product-led companies. These people are a little
Hmm.
bit more technical minded, and they might want to get in there. I think for each company, that split
Hmm.
of who uses product versus demo first will be different. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're definitely seeing both pipelines healthy. It's really interesting to see what sizes of companies and types of titles and who comes in for a demo versus who would rather show themselves around, so to speak. And
Yeah.
we'll see some what would be considered like a whale account coming in
Uh-huh.
through the product sign up. And I'm not sure if they would have requested the demo, so we might have missed that opportunity for that person to convert if we didn't have both paths there.
Yeah, well, and I think too, I mean, like it also gives you an opportunity so it can go both ways, right? You can sign up, get a trial, start poking around a little bit, and then you stop and you're like, okay, I've kind of seen a little bit. I kind of know what's going on. I kind of like what I see. I want a demo, right? So trials actually driving demos because now I've been educated a little bit more. I've seen what it looks like. And then it can go the opposite direction too. I started with a demo. Now I just kind of want to try it out. Like, I don't know, like Breezy, like super interesting. She's a great salesperson. Just kidding, your marketer. But anyway, I'm sure you're great at selling the product as well. But at any rate, then like you get off that demo really excited, and then you just decide to go and sign up for it. So I think like both can feed each other in a way, even if the signups driving more quantity of signups, on a monthly basis versus demos. Both I think feed each other, which is really really important to keep in mind.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. The crossover between the two is high. It's
yeah,
at least 80% plus. I should have pulled some metrics for you, but a vast majority of our folks are choosing both. And I hear the same from other companies as well. That,
yeah,
even with that initial sign up, also it's about how you position it, right? So marketers listen to this podcast. It's about how you position that call after someone signs up for to use your product. So for us, we offer
hmm,
it as, this is an early space. Maybe you're trying to learn how to better enable your revenue team. We can get on a
hmm,
call and do a strategic one-on-one call and talk about your goals and your outcomes. So it's what a demo should have been, but hasn't been for the last 10 years. So we position it a little bit differently to say, hey, this is going to be a strategic call, and we're here to help support you. And if you so choose to use Correlated, great. And if you don't, then either way, we hopefully you walked away with some new knowledge, and we'll talk to you when you're ready. So
no doubt. No, I completely agree. I think you said it really well. All right, so I know we talked about this like briefly before we got on. I know this is in flux in terms of metrics, but how does is there? I mean, maybe is there a difference? Let's start there. Like, is there a big difference in terms of some of the metrics that one looks at between sales led and product led? And I guess even maybe you could just answer either that or more directly for you, correlated. What are you guys looking at on a monthly basis from a marketing perspective? Like, what should people be putting in their Excel spreadsheet or a Tableau dashboard or whatever they use to report on this stuff to understand how things are flowing through the funnel? Like, what does it look like for you today? And maybe obviously there's a future to that too, right? Because I'm sure things will change, to your point.
yeah, definitely. So one of the things we're not doing is we don't have any gated content. So
Hmm.
for us, the only things that people can really convert on our website would be if they're signing up for an event, we need their email just so that we can add them to the calendar invite. And then
Hmm.
there's an option for people to stay in touch with us, which is surprisingly a very high number of people converting to sort of stay in touch with us, which is great. I
Really?
think it shows that they know that we won't spam them on the the other side, which is good. Hopefully we've been doing our marketing correctly. Then
Hmm.
they could sign up to use the product, or they could sign up for a demo. And I think that's pretty much
Hmm.
about it. Those are all the conversion opportunities. So it sort of
Hmm.
throws the idea of MQLs really out the window altogether. So we're looking at from all the different areas of that customer journey, maybe from start to finish. We're looking at, okay, what is our overall website data? What are people looking at specifically on our website? Because where you
Hmm.
used to be looking at what are people converting on, we're just really looking at what are they interested in and reading about. And then
Hmm.
we're looking at the number of people who are then converting, whether it's all of those different buckets I just talked about a second ago. Okay, what's the conversion
Yep.
rate from visitor to anything? Then we're looking at both demos and product signups. So what's our overall pipeline on people who are closer to what we would maybe think of as like bottom of funnel ish. Then
Yep.
we'll look at trials. So people who go through the demo process or product sign up process, which is intermingled anyways. How
Hmm.
have they successfully, how is that trial going? And are they being successful in that trial? Obviously, inside of that, we're tracking a ton of metrics of,
Sure,
have
I'm
people
sure.
integrated core pieces? Have they been signing in? Have they been inviting other users? What are our weekly active customers? What does that look like? A ton of stuff in that specific product piece. And then
Hmm.
obviously, paid customers, looking at expansion, stuff like that.
Hmm. Do you guys break down things? I mean, this is not to open up a huge can of worms in terms of attribution, but do you guys break things down in terms of trying to understand like where people are coming from with respects to those signups and respects to others, or like what's your kind of thought process on attribution? Are you generally just looking at the bigger picture, or are you really trying to get analytical about it and try to say, all right, well, this came from LinkedIn and this from Facebook, and we push this content and so on and so forth? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at it wherever we can. So,
Yeah.
where I say that is very cognizant of the dark funnel, and knowing that some of the
Hmm.
best marketing activities are activities that you won't be able to get attribution for, and that's sort of just a fact of
Hmm.
the matter. So, understanding
Hmm.
of that, we are still measuring anywhere that we can and trying to understand what's best converting for us, and where can we drive
Yep.
more there. And so some of those things that are converting really well for us are LinkedIn is a great one, both organic,
Hmm.
and we do have some paid ads there, but vast majority is all just organic LinkedIn. We're involved in a lot
Great.
of different Slack communities, and we're not talking anything about Correlated. We are simply there to help answer people's questions as they bring things up, which positions us as sort of
Hmm.
thought leaders. They come and read about more other content, and that is proving to be um, a great funnel for us. Let's see, what else are we doing? I had one other thing in mind, but I'll think of.
You guys run
Oh,
Google
of
Ads or
course.
Facebook? And sorry, I'm like so partial to paid media, so that's the reason for my questions. I'm always curious.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, the other thing I was going to say is that our organic search traffic has been ticking up quite a bit, which I
Hmm.
think is shows that we're creating great content. I also have an SEO background, and so of any content we
Hmm.
create, I always put in all the good SEO practices and sort of
Hmm.
fingers crossed. But I think it's also we can attribute some of that to our paid strategy, because paid strategy
Hmm.
supports organic strategy as well. And
Yep.
so we do have a couple ads. We don't have insane amounts of ads today, but we do have some ads on Google and some ads on LinkedIn. The Google
Hmm.
ads are primarily, so first of all, we have a name that happens to compete with the dictionary. So we are
I
battling that
saw
one
that.
out against
I
Correlated.
saw that. Yep.
And then we also, just sort of like industry terms, product led growth, product led revenue, things like that.
Yeah.
And then on the LinkedIn side, it is very much an awareness play today, mostly all top of the
Hmm.
funnel, so to speak, content. And then some of it,
Hmm.
which is moving more towards middle of funnel. And we use the LinkedIn ads as a way to warm up territories for our
Hmm.
outbound SDR team to reach out to. And
Hmm. Love
so we're
that.
sort of like warming up these accounts and these people at the accounts, so that when they reach out for a conversation, they're at least somewhat aware of Correlated and sort of what we're up to and what we're
Hmm.
thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about organic. I mean, clearly you're extremely active on organic. Is the rest of the team? I'm not. I don't know if I'm connected as much with the whole team and Correlated. Clearly, you're probably driving a lot of organic activity on LinkedIn, I would imagine. But do you guys have? I mean, what does your organic strategy look like? I mean, what are you guys doing specifically? Just having everyone post from personal accounts, try to add value, kind of the typical things that you see across a lot of different accounts, or something different?
Yeah, yeah, that some anyone who's interested on the team, or has some they've ducked their head around the corner on posting their own thoughts and opinions. I always encourage them, offer to read through their posts, and before they
Yeah.
go live. I think there's some anxieties for folks, and so try to make that as available as possible. And then for my team, let them
Hmm.
know, hey, you're allowed to be creative. If you say something that maybe was a little just too crazy, we'll talk about it, but I'm not going to
Yep.
get angry with you. It's all right. No problem. I'd rather have you be out
Hmm.
there and be active and make a couple mistakes along the way than try to button everything up. So there's that.
Yeah.
Then we also have the podcast. So we do have the product led revenue
Oh,
podcast
that's
that
right.
we run,
Hmm.
and then our the entire team helps to share that. So um,
Hmm.
they are all posting the video or clip from it on their own. I encourage them, again, I give them some prompts on what they could write about, and I encourage them
Hmm.
to share it in their own way if they'd like. Some choose to just use exactly the prompt. But that's also,
Hmm.
a good way to just get everyone involved. And I think it also helps to push them to post more organically on their own as well. Just because now
Exactly.
they kind of see how to do it. They see people interacting with them, and you know, it's always fun.
Yeah, I think there's a huge value. I haven't seen this from you guys. Maybe it's something I missed, but there's a huge point of taking that podcast and clipping it up not only organically but also from a paid perspective, and making sure you get those cool highlights or clips or takeaways, so that you can put that specifically to the exact audience that you want to go to. And we've been seeing that very successful. Some other clients where, for example, if it's a webinar podcast, let's just say that you had 100 people listen or consume that content. Then you get out that one clip, you can get 5,000, 10,000, depending on, of course, how much money you spend, to watch 50, 75% of that clip. And now you've got way more consumption of it, maybe not the whole thing. And then of course you've got people clicking into it and then watching that content. And I think you guys put it on your website as well, so they could go in and watch the rest of the episode if they were interested. All sorts of things like that to create awareness, because I think in your space, especially, at least from what I know about it, it seems like it's a newer thing. Like, not as many people know what to search for when searching for a product like Correlated. So I think that the awareness plays so critical there on social channels where people are hanging out, where you've got, hey, here's great content. You've obviously got your podcast. You clip that up, I think, would be the other thing I do for sure on paid. And then you could start even generating more awareness there. And then ultimately, obviously, some more product marketing types of things like that. And like saying, all right, hey, here's actually how it works and what it is, right? Here's what it does. Because I think that's also the critical point. I don't know if you guys have gotten into that. You were mentioning middle of funnel stuff as well, and like kind of lower down, but it's like, all right, you put a bunch of great content out. I'm still not quite sure, what does Correlated do though? What's the benefit, right? And I think there's a case to be made of like having some of that, whether it's organic, paid, or in any such form, just making sure that people know like what you guys do after seeing all this great content from you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we're focused on this quarter, actually, and next quarter, is some of that more middle of funnel and bottom of funnel content as well.
Yep.
But without, sacrificing what we have going on top of
Right.
funnel. Because for us today, like you mentioned, so we are building a new category, and there's a couple ways to think about things where maybe you're reducing some of your BI licenses, or maybe you're reducing some of this and that internally, but overall there's no tool that you're
Hmm.
ripping out and putting Correlated in for. This is a new tool in a
Exactly.
new space, and so that education piece is so crucial. But yeah, you're totally
Yeah.
right. Being able to move people along. Okay, now they know about us, they're
Yeah.
interested, they're learning with us, but now it's time to show a little bit more of what we can do and see if there's a value add for
Yeah.
them on the other side.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, good stuff. Well, I promised I'd end before your call. So it's been awesome chatting. I think we're going to have to do this probably again, because I have even more questions. I always end these things like after 45, like, yeah, I could probably go for another hour or two. But of course, that'd be a long podcast. So anyway, well, thanks for jumping on for a little bit, and we'll definitely stay in touch on LinkedIn. If they want to get in touch with you or Correlated, what's the best way to do that? Just kind of follow you on LinkedIn, or get in touch with
Yeah.
you right on the website?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Correlated, getcorrelated.com, or you can follow us on LinkedIn and message along there. For myself, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in a ton of Slack communities, so find me wherever, and always happy to have conversations with folks.
Love it. Well, sounds good. Well, it was awesome talking to you again.
Thanks, Jonathan. Bye.
All right. Cheers.